Hello friends, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, coming to you in July of 2024 with a little bit of a flashback from the archives from July of 2012. And this is an interesting little nugget. I come across all sorts of information, as you can imagine, and I have gone through and reported on and forgotten about more stories than most people will probably ever see in their lifetime. There's so much information that comes across my newswires that sometimes it's hard to keep track of it all, but there is a story or two that really sticks in the back of my mind and I still think about from time to time, and what you're about to see is one of them. Specifically, this was a report that I filed as an eye-opener report back in July of 2012 on something called the Sentient World Simulation, which is something that I have had cause to reference in some of my podcasts recently, because I still think about this and how crazy, over-the-top, absolute, in-your-face, staggering this idea was back when it was first being brought to the public's attention almost 20 years ago. And, well, I'll let you watch this report. Think about what is being said. Obviously, the entire transcript of this report will be posted on the site, and you will be able to go through all of the resources and links and all of the documents that are being cited here. And once you do, at the other side of this flashback, I'll just have a little update for you about what has come to the surface about this incredible sentient world simulation in the intervening years. First, take a look at this report from 2012. Welcome. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com with your eye-opener report for BoilingFrogsPost.com. The NSA's illegal warrantless wiretapping program, the building of the massive NSA data center in Utah to permanently store copies of all digital communications sent around the world, the UK government's communications data bill to monitor emails, instant messages, and other personal information. What was dismissed as crazy conspiracy theory just over a decade ago has become, in this post-9/11 era, the all-too-familiar stuff of newspaper headlines and talking head reportage. In fact, it was about a decade ago that the tactic of the intelligence agency seemed to change. Instead of keeping their activities classified, referring to the NSA as no such agency, for example, or officially denying the existence of Echelon, the government increasingly began shoving this information in the public's face.
This was the mindset that in 2002 led the Bush administration to dredge up John Poindexter from wherever it was that he was. He was actually they worked for defense contractors, and they dredged him up, and he was going to start the program that they called the Total Information Awareness Program. And the logo, which I actually looked at in the last couple of weeks that you should go and look at just because you won't believe how creepy it is, has a pyramid with this huge eye hovering over it. This eye that was going to be the all-seeing eye. And the only problem with the Total Information Awareness Program was that they just put a name on it that was too honest about what it was. And it freaked everybody out, and so they had to pretend that they weren't going to go forward with it. But of course what they did was they incrementally and in very clear ways recreated the Total Information Awareness Program under a whole variety of different legislative initiatives. And this idea that every single form of technological communication by law must be constructed to permit government backdoor interception and surveillance is an expression of what this surveillance state mindset is, that there can be no such thing as any form of privacy from the US government. That is the mindset that has led the surveillance state to be this sprawling, vast, ubiquitous, and always expanding instrument that state and corporate power users employ in order to safeguard their power.
Perhaps the scariest thing about something like the Total Information Awareness Office is not merely that it was proposed in the first place, or that it incorporated such blatantly creepy Orwellian imagery to convey its true nature and purpose, but that as we sit here 10 years later, and as the core functions of that TIA office are now being openly performed by the NSA, DHS, and other governmental agencies, people are now actively making excuses for this nightmare police state. "If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear," has always been the rallying cry for those who are too afraid of questioning presumed governmental authority to speak out against the surveillance state and the implied assumption of guilt that goes along with it. With feigned bemusement, these moral midgets inevitably ask, "What's so bad about the government spying on you anyway?" The answer, of course, is that the very question implies that the agencies tasked with carrying out this constant Big Brother surveillance are themselves above reproach, shining lights of moral rectitude who would never abuse this incredible power for nefarious ends. For the unimaginative out there, Hollywood yarns like Enemy of the State have provided fictional examples of what can go wrong if someone, somewhere, abuses the power of information and surveillance to target an innocent person in the wrong place at the wrong time. To be sure, the power that these technologies give for agencies, or corrupt groups within those agencies, to destroy the lives of targeted individuals is itself a fitting answer to the question of why government surveillance should be troubling to us. But beyond what can happen to specific targeted individuals in such a scenario is a much larger question. What if this data, our emails, our phone calls, our credit card transactions, our social media posts, our cell phone GPS logs, and all of the hundreds of other pieces of data that are admittedly being collected on us each and every day, were being fed into a database so gargantuan it contains a digital version of every single person on the planet? And what if that database were being used by the Department of Defense to wargame various scenarios, from public reactions to natural disasters, to the likelihood of civil unrest in the wake of a declaration of martial law? Remarkably, this is precisely what is happening. It is called the Sentient World Simulation. The program's aim, according to its creator, is to be a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. In practical terms, that equates to a computer simulation of the entire planet, complete with billions of nodes representing every person on the Earth. The project is based out of Purdue University in Indiana at the Synthetic Environment for Analysis and Simulations Laboratory. It is led by Alok Chaturvedi, who in addition to heading up the Purdue lab also makes the project commercially available via his private company, Simulex Inc., which boasts an array of government clients, including the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice, as well as private sector clients like Eli Lilly and Lockheed Martin. Chaturvedi's ambition is to create reliable forecasts of future world events based on imagined scenarios. In order to do this, the simulations gobble up breaking news, census data, economic indicators, and climactic events in the real world, along with proprietary information such as military intelligence. Although not explicitly stated, the very type of data on digital communications and transactions now being gobbled up by the NSA, DHS, and other government agencies make ideal data for creating reliable models of every individual's habits, preferences, and behaviors that could be used to fine-tune these simulations and give more reliable results. Using this data, the SEAS laboratory and its Sentient World Simulation offshoot are able to create detailed, operable, real-time simulations of at least 62 nations. The Iraq and Afghanistan computer models, according to a 2007 Register report on the project, each has about 5 million individual nodes representing things such as hospitals, mosques, pipelines, and people. At the time of initial reports on the program 5 years ago, there were only 62 country-level simulations being run by the US Department of Defense. These simulations grouped humans into composites, with 100 individuals acting as a single node. But already at that time, the US Army had used the systems to create a 1-to-1 level simulation of potential Army recruits. The ultimate aim would be to archive enough data on each individual to be able to make a computer model of everyone on the planet, one that could be used to predict the behaviors and reactions of every single person in the event of various scenarios. The program can be used to predict what would happen in the event of a large-scale tsunami, for example, or how people would react during a bioterror attack. Businesses can use the models to predict how a new product would fare in the market, what kind of marketing plans would be most effective, or how best to streamline a company's organization. The original concept paper for the project was published in 2006, and in 2007 it was reported that both Homeland Security and the Defense Department were already using the system to simulate the American public's reaction to various crises. In the intervening 5 years, however, there has been almost no coverage at all of the Sentient World Simulation, or its progress in achieving a model of the Earth. There is a very good chance that these types of systems are, at least for the moment, pure quackery. Computers are only as valuable as their programming, after all, and the algorithms required to accurately predict responses in chaotic systems with multiple, dimly understood variables is orders of magnitude beyond what is currently possible. Or is it? One of the great ironies of our time, as Glenn Greenwald goes on to point out in his speech on the surveillance state, is that although we live in a time when it is possible for nebulous government agencies to know every detail of your life, from what you ate for breakfast to where you shopped last night to who your friends are, we are also living in an age of unprecedented ignorance about what our own governments are actually doing.
But one other point that's worth making about how this works, about how the surveillance state works and how power is exercised through it, and this I think is probably the most pernicious part, and I refer to this as the one-way mirror, the government's one-way mirror. At exactly the same time, this is really so remarkable to me, at exactly the same time that the government has been massively expanding its ability to know everything that we're doing, it has simultaneously erected a wall of secrecy around it that prevents us from knowing anything that they're doing.
This is the heart of the matter. Somehow we are expected to go along with the sophomoric sophism that if we have nothing to hide, then we have nothing to fear. Yet at the same time we are asked to believe that the government must keep all manner of information secret from the public in order to carry out its work of protecting that public. If the government has nothing to hide, then why doesn't it release the notes, memoranda, and findings of the 9/11 Commission in full and unredacted? Why doesn't it release the records of the JFK assassination instead of arguing, as it is, that those records should once again be removed from a declassification review that's to take place in 2013, 50 years after the assassination itself took place? Why doesn't it release the full audit trail of what banks received the emergency TARP funds and in what amounts? Is it because, after all, the government does have something to hide from the public that is its ostensible master? Is it because the old maxim that knowledge is power is more true than we could ever know, and that the government's one-way insistence on transparency for the citizens and opacity for itself is a reflection of the power that it holds over us? The Sentient World Simulation is just one example of one program run by one company for various governmental clients. But it is a significant peek behind the curtain at what those who are really running our society want. Complete control over every facet of our lives, achieved through a complete invasion of everything that was once referred to as privacy. To think that this is the only such program that exists, or even that we have any significant details about the ways that the SWS has already been used, would be hopelessly naive. So where does this leave a public that is at such a disadvantage in this information warfare? A public that is effectively told that anything and everything they do, say, or buy can and will be catalogued by the AI control grid, even as the details of that grid are to be kept from them. Unfortunately, there's no easy way back from the precipice that we were ushered towards with the creation of the national security state and the passage of the National Security Act of 1947. Perhaps we've already stepped over that precipice, and there is no going back in the current political paradigm. These are things for an informed, aware, knowledgeable citizenry to decide through a societal dialogue over the nature of and importance of privacy. But without a general awareness that programs like the Sentient World Simulation even exist, what hope do we have in counteracting it? Hey guys, James Corbett here from 2024 again. Alright, so you have just seen that 2012 report, and if you have taken the time to go through that report and follow the documents, etc., pretty stunning stuff, and the type of thing that will probably stick with you for decades, like it has for me. Wow, we're not talking 2024 with all the highfalutin AI, LLM technology and ChatGPTs and what have you, constructing a complete simulation of the entire world and every single individual in it that's being used in real time to process various scenarios. No. We're talking about all of that, but 20 years ago, in secretive government projects, or at least public projects being run by universities for the Department of Defense. Crazy stuff. Really crazy stuff. And to think there is some digital you being run on some simulation of the planet that they're wargaming and testing various maneuvers. What would happen if a sniper were to take down this presidential candidate? How would people react? Let's type it into the Sentient World Simulation. Anyway, crazy stuff. I hope you saw this report when it first aired in 2012, or at the very least, I hope you do have it on your 2012 data archive USB, because it is on there. So thank you very much for your support in making this work possible and for preserving the data for all time. But as I said at the beginning, let's check the update. Where has this story gone in the last, 12 years since I filed that report, really 18 years since this story first started to break back in 2006. Where are we now? Well, let's check. Let's go to the bastion of truthiness. Wikipedia for Synthetic Environment for Analysis and Simulations, which notes that Purdue University's Synthetic Environment for Analysis and Simulations, or SEAS, is currently being used by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Department of Defense to simulate crises on the U.S. mainland. SEAS enables researchers and organizations to try out their models or techniques in a publicly known, realistically detailed environment. It's now capable of running real-time simulations for up to 62 nations, including Iraq, Afghanistan, and China. The simulations gobble up breaking news, census data, economic indicators, and climatic events in the real world, along with proprietary information such as military intelligence. The Iraq and Afghanistan computer models are the most highly developed and complex of the 62 available to JFCOM J9. Each has about 5 million individual nodes representing things such as hospitals, mosques, pipelines, and people. All right. Okay, SEAS was developed to help Fortune 500 companies with strategic planning. Yeah, okay. Anyway, we know all the cover story. And then it goes on to say, Sentient World Simulation is the name given to the current vision of making SEAS a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. Crazy stuff, right? But hold on. What is this note at the very top of the article? This article needs to be updated. Please help update this article to reflect recent events or newly available. And that update notice is from May 2016, which is already 8 years ago, guys. So, so they're using SEAS to simulate crises on the U.S. mainland. Where does that source from? Oh, the Register article on Sentient World War Games on the Grandest Scale, published June 23rd, 2007. Yes, which is one of those, at that time, 5-year-old reports that I was citing in my 2012 report. That's still one of the go-to articles on this simulation. So what is happening not only with SEAS specifically, but with the Sentient World Simulation idea? Good question. I will put that question out on the table for any would-be budding researchers in the crowd who want to really sink their teeth into an interesting topic. Might I suggest this might be one to follow up? What can you dig up on Purdue University's SEAS or the Sentient World Simulation, generally speaking? How did that morph? How did that idea undoubtedly take on different names and different forms and go into different areas? But undoubtedly something like this is working at the moment. But what can you dig up on it? It's truly it's a fascinating story, and all the more fascinating for the fact that it was reported in a brief flurry in 2006, 2007, and then nothing. Silence. Crickets. Oh, they don't do that anymore. They were just trying to construct a real-time running simulation of the entire world and everyone in it, but they whatever, it just kind of went away. Anyway, an intriguing little piece of history, and I think worth your time and attention. Anyway, I'd be very interested to see if you can dig up any more information about this or any more recent information about this idea. But the ball's in your court there on that regard. And of course, Corbett Report members are invited to log in and leave anything that you do find in the show notes for today's, or in the comments for today's episode. And thank you once again to all the people who have purchased either the 2012 USB data archive or any of the other data archives to help preserve this information for posterity, because as you can see, it isn't just breaking news headlines. It is stories like this that will persist for decades to come that I think is worthy of preservation. So thank you to all those who do support the work. But that's going to do it for today. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. Looking forward to talking to you again in the near future.